The Brown family from Alaskan Bush People has always faced tough times living in the wilderness, but nothing compares to what Joshua Bam Bam Brown is dealing with now. As the second oldest son in the family, Joshua is now facing serious legal consequences, and it could change his life forever. Many fans are shocked by the news, as no one expected something this serious to happen. Court records have now revealed what's really going on, showing just how bad things have gotten for him. This situation could mean that Joshua might have to say goodbye to the life he's always known in the wild. Before any legal trouble, Joshua's life was all about nature and survival. He grew up in Alaska, far away from the modern world. His parents, Billy and Omi Brown, raised their children off the grid, teaching them how to survive in the wilderness instead of relying on technology or city life. While other kids played video games and went to school, Joshua was learning how to build shelters and track animals. The family believed in complete freedom from bills, rules, and the pressures of modern society. Joshua learned from a young age to be independent and to live by his own rules. In 2014, when the Discovery Channel started filming their lives, producers expected to show a simple survival story. But they ended up capturing something much deeper, a close-knit family that stuck together no matter how harsh the conditions were. Joshua became popular with viewers for his calm attitude and strong loyalty to his family. While some of his brothers were more quick-tempered or impulsive, Joshua was often the one who thought carefully before acting. Fans admired how he mixed wilderness knowledge with emotional maturity. However, being on TV brought problems the family didn't expect. Their personal struggles were no longer private. Every mistake, big or small, was now seen by millions. The line between their real life and what they showed on television started to blur. And soon, questions began to surface about what was really going on behind the scenes. For years, the Brown family received money from Alaska's Permanent Fund Dividend program. This program gives Alaskan residents a share of the state's oil profits, but only if they live in Alaska full-time. As the family's TV fame grew, some people started to notice inconsistencies. Fans on social media pointed out that the Browns were often seen in other states, not in Alaska, during times when they claimed to be living there. Investigators began looking into it more seriously. They found out that between 2009 and 2012, several members of the Brown family had spent more than half the year outside of Alaska. That made them ineligible for the payments they had been receiving. Joshua, being an adult at the time, had filled out the forms himself, claiming he lived in Alaska full-time. Each form included a warning that lying could lead to legal trouble. But according to the investigators, his claims weren't true. At first, the Browns said it was just a misunderstanding. Billy Brown, Joshua's father, explained that they always thought of Alaska as their home, even if they traveled sometimes. Joshua agreed and said their way of life didn't fit into the usual definition of residency. But as more evidence came out, it became harder to defend their position. What began as simple questions about paperwork soon turned into a full investigation into fraud. Alaska state troopers looked into travel records, credit card use, and even talked to people who had seen the Browns outside of Alaska. They found that the family had collected over $20,000 in payments during years when they shouldn't have. Joshua's share was about $8,000 over 4 years. Although that's not a huge amount compared to their income from TV, the state saw it as an important issue. The dividend program is built on trust. Residents are expected to tell the truth when applying. Joshua's case became a symbol of how serious the state is about protecting that trust. The Brown family from Alaskan Bush People had built their lives around a simple, rugged existence in the wild, far away from modern society. But their growing fame, once a celebration of their survival skills and family bond, eventually became part of the problem. What was meant to be a documentary about their wilderness lifestyle became a source of evidence used against them in court. Footage filmed in states like Washington and Oregon clearly showed them outside Alaska, even though they were applying for and receiving Alaska's Permanent Fund Dividend. Money meant only for full-time residents of the state. For Joshua Bam Bam Brown, the situation was even more serious. As an adult, he had signed and submitted legal documents stating that he lived in Alaska year-round. Unlike some of his younger siblings, who might say they were just following their parents' instructions, Joshua was expected to know better. Investigators saw his actions as deliberate and began building a case against him. Each document he signed came with a warning about the consequences of false statements, and according to the court, he had ignored those warnings. As the investigation deepened, state prosecutors brought forward charges of theft and falsification of legal documents. These were not minor accusations. They carried real consequences, including the possibility of jail time. This was a heavy blow for someone whose public image was built around living with integrity in the unforgiving wilderness. In 2016, Joshua arrived at the courthouse in Juneau wearing a suit, a rare sight for someone more used to flannel shirts and boots. Alongside him was his father, Billy Brown. The courtroom felt like a different world from the forested mountains and remote cabins they called home. But here, surrounded by lawyers and flashing cameras, they had to face a new kind of challenge, one they couldn't simply walk away from. Inside the courtroom, the prosecutors presented their case in detail. They argued that Joshua and others in the family had knowingly filed false residency claims in order to receive state money they weren't eligible for. They used travel records, financial statements, and even clips from the family's own TV show to prove that the Browns spent a significant amount of time outside Alaska during the years they claimed to live there. The footage painted a clear picture. The Browns weren't living full-time in Alaska as they had claimed. Joshua's lawyer asked the court for leniency. He said Joshua had been raised in isolation with little formal education, and that he had signed the documents because his father told him to, not because he intended to deceive anyone. This defense quietly shifted some of the blame to Billy Brown, which created a moment of tension between father and son. When Joshua was questioned, he stayed calm. When asked why he signed the forms even though he wasn't living in Alaska the whole time, he said, "My father taught me that home isn't just where you sleep, it's where your heart lives. Alaska has always been our true home, even when we had to be elsewhere." His answer was heartfelt, but it didn't meet the legal standards for residency. The judge remained unmoved. The most damaging evidence came when prosecutors showed Joshua's signed applications next to photos placing him in California and Washington during those same periods. The contrast was clear and impossible to ignore. As the final piece of evidence was shown, Joshua closed his eyes, seeming to realize what was coming. The judge found Joshua guilty of filing false applications and receiving money he wasn't entitled to. The courtroom was quiet as the judge gave the sentence, 30 days in jail, to be served in full with no early release. For someone who had spent his life free in the wild, being locked in a cell was a punishment that went far beyond losing freedom. It meant losing a way of life. The judge acknowledged this, saying that confinement would be especially hard for someone used to such an unconventional lifestyle, but that consequences were necessary to protect the fairness of the permanent fund dividend system. In addition to the jail sentence, Joshua was ordered to repay the roughly $8,000 he had received in dividend payments, along with fines and court costs that brought the total over $10,000. This amount, though not massive compared to television earnings, was still a burden for a family that had once lived on very little. But more than the money, the repayment was symbolic. It was a public admission that the money should never have been theirs to begin with. The court also required Joshua to complete 40 hours of community service in Alaska within 6 months of his release. This part of the sentence was meant to be a chance to give back to the community and make amends. The judge explained that it wasn't just about punishment, it was about restoring trust and making things right. However, the harshest part of the sentence wasn't the jail time or the fines. It was the judge's decision to permanently ban Joshua from ever receiving the dividend again. Even after he served his time and paid what he owed, this ban would remain. Legal experts later said that permanent bans like this are rare and usually only given in serious cases. For Joshua, this meant that no matter how many years he lived in Alaska from that point forward, he would never again be part of that shared state benefit. It was a lifelong reminder of his mistake. As the verdict was read, observers noticed a change in Joshua's expression. It wasn't anger or frustration, just quiet resignation. The man who had battled wild animals and freezing temperatures was now facing a different kind of wilderness, a legal and emotional journey he hadn't prepared for.